There are forces of good and forces of evil at work in the world today. What are these forces? Who is responsible for the good? And who is responsible for the evil? Richard Shoff talks about current events which are rarely discussed by the mainstream media, events that affect us all. This program seeks to identify, to inform, and to equip the believer for what's ahead. Welcome to What in the World is Going On?
This is What in the World is Going On. I am your host, Richard Shoff. The program is sponsored by Lincoln Log Homes, Kannapolis, North Carolina. We are pro-Christian, pro-American, pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, here by the grace of God. If you're interested in a nice log home, we can put you in a 1,000-square-foot unit for under $1,200. Whoops, $12,000. Bet you got your attention there, didn't I? Anyway, give us a call, 800-848-3310. Just a little follow-up. A couple of weeks ago, I asked for your prayers. We have a missionary that is being held hostage in a Turkish prison. That is. We asked for your prayer for his release. He had an upcoming trial a couple of weeks ago, and the news from that trial was, we're going to hold you over for the next trial. The U.S. has been putting a lot of pressure on him. He is originally a North Carolina native, and Senator Tillis, together with Democrat Senator Shaheen, have been active jointly, and they're thinking about putting sanctions on Turkey over this. Well, our missionary was released to house arrest this past week. Maybe he's going to be released altogether. Let's continue our prayers. Another thing I want to mention to you, Jim Jordan has announced that he's going to run for Speaker of the House. The odds of him making it are not great, but it sure would be good. And let's remember the odds of Donald Trump making it to the White House weren't that good either. If Jim Jordan doesn't make it, Scalise, who's a member of the official team there, the leadership in the House, would be a good man. You know, our president speaks out very firm. Our president is a voice to be reckoned with because his threats are normally not idle. When he promises something, the record is that he fulfills it if there's any way possible. His record on campaign promises is better than any president I remember. If he says something, the world listens. And he's made a not very thinly veiled nuclear threat to Iran. Hold on to your seat, folks. President Trump just issued that not-so-veiled nuclear threat to President Rouhani of Iran. I'm going to quote it. Never, ever threaten the United States again, or you'll suffer consequences, the likes of which few throughout history have ever suffered before. We're no longer a country that will stand for your demented words of violence and death. Be cautious, with consequences the likes of which few throughout history have ever suffered. I was speaking to an uninformed acquaintance the other day, and I was relating exactly what the president said and asked him, what do you think this means? Well, he was uninformed, but he said Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Well, it's recently been reported that China was ceasing its purchase of petrochemicals from Iran, switching instead to Saudi Arabia, because in China's words, China does not want to be one of the sides in the war. The report went on that China doesn't make mistakes in wording on that scale. The fact that they said it means they already know war is likely coming. One day later, we have President Trump's publicly saying what he just said. Folks, this is very, very serious. While working on determining what Iran threatened, my guess would have been the mother of all wars with the United States. And sure enough, the president of Iran issued his own warning to the U.S. president last Sunday. He said, and I quote, America should know that peace with Iran is the mother of all peace, and war with Iran is the mother of all wars. He told this to a pack of diplomats. Well, Saddam Hussein of Iraq said that to us. Then he took Kuwait by force and wouldn't give it back. With all his troops, all his heavy armor, all his planes, the United States crushed Iraq military in less than 100 days. Iran, on the other hand, fought Iraq to a standstill for 8 years. If Iran couldn't defeat Iraq, their leaders must be suicidal to think that they have even a remote chance of making actual war against the United States. Remember, we wiped out Iraq in 100 days. Iran might take 150 days. Might be time for Iran to shut up. At the same time, and incidentally, I want to just make this note. I've only got one source on this. I like to have a couple of them on anything this significant. I do only have one, but I need to bring it to you anyway. I do have a report from one reliable source, Hal Turner, that an invasion of Gaza could well be imminent. You see, the Hamas officials officially refuse a ceasefire with Israel. That's right. From Hal Turner, Hamas has informed United Nations envoy Nikolai Mladenov of its refusal to accept a ceasefire with Israel. Hamas is already making preparations for what they say will be massive, coordinated attacks, the likes of which neither Israel nor the world has ever seen. On Hal Turner's radio show, he outlined the situation between Hamas, which is the elected representative to represent the Arabs in the occupied Gaza Strip, and Israel. Immediately, the United States had declared Hamas to be a terrorist organization. That's a reminder. Hal explained that the Arabs don't seem to grasp the fact that they're firing of rockets into residential neighborhoods, their launching of mortars into the same neighborhoods, and their release of Molotov balloons and flaming kites, which have set dozens of fires in Israel, is behavior which will beget a lethal military response from the Israelis. Hal went on to say that while he often criticizes Israel and has not always agreed with them, that this does have significant political disagreements with their policies. But on this issue, in these circumstances, he sides with Israel. In his views, the Israelis have demonstrated utterly remarkable restraint in the face of lethal violence unleashed by Hamas and the people of the Gaza Strip. He says, and I quote, "I believe Israel no longer has any choice. They need to go in, by force, and clean out the Gaza Strip using whatever force is necessary." Hamas has unleashed rocket attacks, mortar attacks, Molotov balloons, flaming kites, and also has missiles that can reach I think pretty much all of Israel. I actually have a sketch here that shows which missiles will go how far. I don't see a corner of Israel that they can't attack. He notes this will be a very dirty, no-holds-barred street fight once this thing kicks off. Logic does not work with Hamas. Talking does not work with Hamas. Warnings don't work with them. What choice is left? Israel should invade, go house to house, clean out the rockets, the weapons, and the militants once and for all. The only way to successfully deal with Hamas is to totally defeat them. He said, "I expect the military from Israel to begin in earnest, and soon." But that's only his personal guess, he notes, and is not based on covert intelligence. And again, I only have this one source on this. The United Nations envoy, Molnov, has issued the following statement, quote, "My effort to forego a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas has failed. It should be noted that this was widely misunderstood as the final attempt before an extensive IDF operation." Hal Turner issues a cautionary note. "We need to prepare yourselves mentally for what's coming. I strongly suspect we will see vivid images of brutal death, men, women, children, even infants. I further suspect you'll see and hear on all new level of the screeching about how Israel is terrible, how their actions are not in proportion to what they should be, that how brutal they are. Yeah. But you must keep in mind, all of this could be avoided if the people in Gaza stopped launching rockets, mortars, Molotov balloons, and flaming kites into Israel. I know how hard that is. Stop lobbing rockets and mortars at Israel, and Israel will not back attack you back. It's a no-brainer, folks. A no-brainer for any rational person. The Arabs in Gaza are not rational. None of this has to happen. The Arabs in Gaza will have brought it on themselves if it does. And then we have an update where the IDF distributes leaflets via aircraft in Gaza warning not to take part in riots on the border. Special UN coordinator for the Middle East for their peace prospects to the Egyptian intelligence chief Abbas Kamal, quote, "My efforts to mediate a new ceasefire between Israel and Gaza factions has failed. An IED exploded near IDF forces on the Gaza border. Hamas officials tell Gazans, wherever you find a Zionist, that's a Jewish person, you must kill him. IDF has canceled all leave for soldiers." That's it, folks. All leaves are canceled. Is it go time? Keep your eyes on the Middle East. Now back to the United States. Some miscellaneous items I want to cover. We normally don't have time to get to many of them. I see where Trump has delayed the meeting with Putin until 2019. The White House said Wednesday that President Trump's proposed Washington meeting with Russian President Putin has been delayed in 2019, citing the ongoing probe into Russian interference in the 2016 election. Putin had already sent signals that the fall White House meeting wasn't going to happen. National Security Advisor John Bolton said in a statement that Trump believed his next meeting with Putin should take place after the Russian witch hunt is over. That was a reference to Special Counsel Mueller's investigation. Bolton said the meeting would be after the first of the year. While the statement signaled optimism that the Mueller probe would be completed by the end of the year, no timetable has been given for when that'll be wrapped up. Could well stretch into something beyond 2019. Incidentally, as you probably saw, many members of Congress had objected to the two world leaders meeting again in the fall and also said Putin would not be welcome on Capitol Hill. The recent decision came after the White House rejected a Putin-backed effort to hold a referendum in eastern Ukraine on the region's future. Secretary of State Pompeo said last Wednesday, prior to the announcement that the U.S. would never recognize Russia's annexation of the Crimea, and demanded that Ukraine's territorial integrity be restored. Other signs had already emerged, raising doubt about the second Trump-Putin summit. Last Tuesday, Putin's foreign affairs advisor threw cold water on the prospect of Putin accepting Trump's invitation to visit the White House. He had told journalists in Moscow that no preparations were underway for a meeting in Washington, and there were other options that our leaders could consider, such as a late November meeting of the Group of 20 in Argentina. It was another international meeting, but the U.S. had already said no on that. Trump has long been seeking a second meeting and trying to get Putin to Washington for the meeting. The president met with Putin a couple of times before the meeting in Helsinki. Meanwhile, a recent NBCW Wall Street Journal poll shows Trump approval rating at an all-time high. President Donald Trump's approval rating rose to a high of 45%. This according to a poll released a week ago on Sunday by the Wall Street Journal and NBC News. Trump's approval rating among Republicans stands at 88%, with 50% of the voters saying he's handled the economy better than other major issues. 44% approve of the way he's handled North Korea. Trump's performance in Helsinki alongside Putin drew large support from Republicans. This according to the Access SurveyMonkey report poll recently released last week. Only George Bush had a higher rating at this point of his presidency in the Republican Party. And a Quinnipiac poll noted that the voters don't like the media coverage of Trump. The voters disapprove of the way the media covers Donald Trump. Here's a result of a poll that they conducted. Do you approve or disapprove of the way the news media has covered President Trump? Disapprove 56%. Approval 36%. And by the way, we've had a lot of things brought out to our attention that we ought to be getting rid of. ICE. Did you see where GOP Representative Peter King really dipped the Dems on that? He called them the lunatic wing of the Democrat Party. That from Representative Peter King of New York. He called them gutless. And this based on the recent House vote on a resolution to support the U.S. Immigration and Custom Enforcement. He said, and I quote, "You had 34 Democrats voting no, but even worse, you had 133 voting president. Just present." In other words, they didn't take a stand, pointed out by King. He said, and I quote, "Have the guts to let these men and women know you stand by them, that you support them, and that you're with them, that you're in their corner. Vote yes. If for some reason you have a policy reason to be against them, then have the guts to vote no. But to vote present means that you're afraid to speak out on one of the most important issues at this time." He also reinforced this to a host on a recent program that underreported issue, the Republicans did support ICE 231-1. King pointed out, "I can't believe that Nancy Pelosi told the Democrats to vote present on a key issue. I mean, where are their guts?" There were over 160-something Democrats who either didn't want to go on the record at all or they voted against ICE. Points out that's really terrible. He ripped the Democrats as out of touch with the country, and even real dedicated Democrats, and are very worried about the lunatic wing of the party. And by the way, the National Guard deployment that was recently announced has led to more than 10,000 arrests of illegal immigrants. This from the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Office. The National Guard's deployment to the southwest border in mid-April has led to over 10,000 deportable alien arrests. These are people who illegally entered the U.S. from Mexico. This from the U.S. Customs and Border Protection spokesperson. Because guardsmen are military personnel, they're not law enforcement officers, they cannot apprehend illegal immigrants. But the CBP, that's Customs and Border Protection officers, and Border Patrol agents apprehended thousands of people that guardsmen helped point out to them. The National Guard's presence has also led to the interception of more than 3,300 others who were turned back before they crossed into the U.S. CBP Press Secretary Corey Schneimeyer said in an email to the Washington Examiner. He pointed this out to them. There are over 1,600 National Guard troops at the border assisting with various surveillance, maintenance, and related cooperations and operations. That number could tick up considerably if the 4,000 National Guard troops President Trump approved on April 4th are called on in a future request from CBP. And more on the subject of immigration, Tucker Carlson on Fox News examined the enormous taxpayer cost of illegal immigration. He recently explained what a major expense unlawful immigration is on the American people. The FAIR study showed that illegal aliens do, of course, pay some taxes, but not nearly enough to cover the benefits they receive, causing American taxpayers to spend $135 billion annually for the invaders' upkeep. And a striking illustration of how illegals are robbing us blind, Tucker observed, quote, "Americans spend only about $70 billion every year paying tuition at public colleges and universities. So if you eliminate the expense of illegal immigrants, we could make every public college in the country tuition free and still have about $50 billion left over. Illegal aliens flock to stupid, generous America, where even foreign thieves like them receive an average of more than $8,000 each of free-to-them stuff." This from the American taxpayer. Keep in mind that the $116 billion price tag is an annual cost, something that adds up rather significantly over decades. A new study by the Federation of American Immigrant Reform finds that this country's approximately 11 million illegal immigrants cost taxpayers about $135 billion a year in medical, education, and law enforcement expenses. Now, there's an effort to offset that, sure. They do pay some taxes, but it's only about $19 billion a year. That leaves a deficit of about $116 billion. Not even by Washington standards. That's a huge, huge number. Now, all of this ought to weigh heavily on Congress as they're passing an amnesty bill to benefit DACA, D-A-C-A. You've heard that. DACA Supposedly the list will only benefit a small group, a limited group of illegal immigrants who came here as kids. But if 700,000 DACA recipients become legal citizens, of course, they, under the rules of chain migration, will bring over many more. Estimates suggest millions more, including parents and siblings who may also have entered this country illegally. That's what we're facing, folks. And incidentally, how do you think these folks are going to vote? Wonder why the Dems are behind it. And boy, if this doesn't rock you, non-citizens can legally register to vote in San Francisco school elections. San Francisco began registering non-citizens, including undocumented immigrants, to register to vote in the November election for the city school board. This report reported by the San Francisco Chronicle. The move allows passage of a 2016 measure by San Francisco voters opening school elections to non-citizens, as long as they're over the age of 18, city residents, and have children under 19 in their schools. A quote from Hillary Ronan, a San Francisco supervisor, "This is no-brainer legislation. Why would we not want our parents invested in the education of their children?" That's right, Hillary, even if they're illegals, right? "We want to give immigrants the right to vote." A quote from Norman Yee, a county supervisor, telling a radio station out there. Fortunately, there was a member of the Republican National Committee that said that she disagreed with those assessments. She said the reason I voted against it is that they think the right to vote is something that goes along with citizenship, and it should be. San Francisco became the first city in California to allow non-citizens to vote in local elections following passage of Measure 9, with 54% of the vote. It already failed twice, but they finally got it through. There are concerns that the non-citizen voter registration rolls, which will be open, could be used to target people who entered the United States illegally. Our immigrants are valuable, absolutely. A quote from Supervisor Sandra Lee Feuer. She pointed this out to the San Francisco people. "In San Francisco, we stand together." Well, President Trump and California leaders have clashed repeatedly since the 2016 election over immigrant enforcement, sanctuary cities, and voter fraud. Community organizations since the Mission Economic Development Agency plan to meet with non-citizens to inform them of the possible risks they face and why they should get out to vote. Chicago and some Maryland cities also allow non-citizen residents to vote in school board elections. San Francisco will allow non-citizen voting they will allow it to expire in 2022 unless it's renewed by the Board of Supervisors. Isn't that great? Well, something I want to point out to you folks. If they let them vote in school boards, that's only the beginning. You know, it's kind of like the hot water gets up to a boiling point where you and I are the frogs. They'll soon let illegals vote in presidential elections if those on the left have their way. Want to share something with you. Comes to me from Dave Daubenmeier, titled "Christian Men Kneeling in the Face of Darkness." I don't think there's a nice way to say it. Christian men are so soft. Not a nice way to say it, especially if you're not really concerned about being nice. It's reached the point where I'm almost embarrassed to identify with the sissified men I see representing Christianity, says Coach Dave. What in the world has happened to us? Why is the average Christian man so unlike the Christian men that we find in the Bible? Pick your Bible hero. One of my favorites, David. Take a good look at him and see if you see his prototype in America today. You know, biblical men were real men. They fought evil, spoke the truth, and usually ended up in trouble with the authorities of their day. It's only modern Christian men who find solace and comfort in bowing their collective knees to the forces of darkness. Has there ever been a time in the history of the world where Christian leadership regarded compromise as a sign of godliness? Compromise is weakness. Jesus didn't compromise. He didn't go along to get along. The greater the opposition for his revolutionary message, the more he doubled down. Despite what be modeled for you in your own church, the King of Kings was not a passive, I'm okay, you're okay kind of guy. Incidentally, listeners, they crucified him, you know. This topic is near and dear to my heart because I'm often reminded that my harshness is a turnoff to some sissy Christian men who wouldn't recognize a jockstrap if it flew up and hit him in the face. John the Baptist didn't wear skinny jeans. Jeremiah was not into friendship evangelism, and Jesus did not surround him with a cookie-cutter senior pastors, minister of music, or youth ministers that dot the landscape of America's churches today. He went after the hardcore guys who knew how to get their hands dirty, as opposed to today's pastor CEO, so prevalent in the evangelifishism. Where did we come up with the idea that Jesus was a softy, a pushover, a Mr. Rogers clone? Help me out here. Can you point out for me even one hero in the scriptures that was a weenie? Christianity's in dire need of a reformation. How in the name of all that is holy have we come to the point that any man who speaks his mind is unchristian? Listeners, have you read the book of Acts? Don't you understand that those in the Bible who are most famous are the ones who oppose the status quo? Paul wrote most of the New Testament from jail. A jail cell was his pulpit. Read Acts. Not today, though. No, sir. Anyone who stands up and speaks is considered to be a troublemaker. Challenging the authorities is now taboo. Sowing discord, in what the religious folks call it. Standing up for the truth, exposing sin, pushing back against the darkness, just isn't very Christian anymore. It sure isn't. Well, you just seem to be so harsh in your approach. You can catch a lot more flies with honey than you can with vinegar. You heard that one? Yeah, you sure have. Well, what makes you think we're looking for flies? Flies swarm around things that are dead. And Jesus called us to be salt, not sugar. Well, you say our pastor is a very soft-spoken guy. And he's built a wonderful ministry at our church. Hundreds come to hear his encouraging message every week. Sounds like he's drawn a lot of flies. I like the fly swatter approach better. Christian men have become so soft. Despite what they want you to believe, it was harsh, non-compromising Christian men that built this nation. Compromised, soft, milquetoast Christian men are the ones giving it away. Christian American men are so deceived. Soft men do not fight. Soft men look to reach across the aisle. Soft men pride themselves on their ability to compromise. Soft men tolerate evil. Soft men have soft hands, and soft men go down with a whimper. Harsh men say harsh things. Harsh men take harsh action. Harsh men inspire real men. The Bible is a story of harsh men taking harsh action during harsh times. The American left is harsh. They are Christ-less. They're intent on destroying everything that strong Christian men built. The left advances only because the right is soft. Iron sharpens iron, the Bible tells us. Well, not today. Iron softens iron. That's the message of the American church. Sit down, shut up, and get with the program. Don't make waves. God is love. Don't be angry. Remember, silence in the face of evil is evil itself. Not to speak is to speak, and not to act is to act. A quote from Bonhoeffer. America is being bombarded with evil. Why do you think submission to evil is strength? What type of man cowers in the face of evil? Folks, what does this remind you of? Kind of sounds like Trump in action, doesn't it? You see, Donald Trump means what he says. He's a man that started with domestic policy promises being fulfilled and the embassy being moved to Jerusalem, jobs in abundance. Because he made these stands and fulfilled these promises, North Korea listens. Iran is listening. Putin is listening. They know they are dealing with a strong man on the national scene. I think that's why the Lord gave us Trump in the presidency. Let's support him. Let's have his back. Let's stand with him as strong Christians should. Goodbye until next week.